Good evening, members of the media. Good evening, members of the cabinet. Other visitors to the room. Thank you very much for coming out once again for me to give you a brief synopsis of what took place in our Inter-Sessional Heads of Government meeting in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. As you know, the CARICOM Heads of Government meet twice a year. We meet at the Inter-Sessional meetings, and then you have the full Heads of Government meeting. This meeting was an intersessional because the chairmanship of this organization is held by Grenada, and that chairmanship would move to Jamaica in July. And this meeting in Port-au-Prince was the intersessional meeting, and it was quite a hectic event. We concluded our discussions at 1:30 this morning, and we've been traveling since 6 o'clock. So basically, it was a fairly heavy agenda. One of the issues that came up early was a complaint from one of our sister territories that the agenda for these meetings tend to be a little too heavy, too long, there are too many items on the agenda. So, what that does, it causes the heads not to be able to go into as much depth as one would like to on some of the meatier issues. So the Secretariat was advised to be more circumspect in observing the regulations with respect to how matters come onto the agenda. Well, we, Trinidad and Tobago, had got in the Guyana meeting a matter on the agenda, which was the single market and economy. That was our instance of putting something on the agenda in recent times. So we escaped the complaint on this occasion as a violator. But that single market and economy, that issue is now fully embraced by the heads of government. We had some discussions on it, but not in the actual details of the matter. But what we have agreed to do is when the heads meet in Jamaica, at the normal 2-day meeting, the first half of the first day would be dedicated to the single market and economy. And we all now have, from now until that time, to do all the preliminaries, and the Secretariat has done a significant amount of work. The documents will be circulated and studied by the various countries so we can re-engage the issue properly when the Heads of Government meeting resumes in Jamaica on July 4th. So we'll have 1 day for the rest of the agenda, and the first day pretty much would be taken up by CSME. That was in lieu of a special meeting being called to deal only with the CSME. But the logistics would have delayed that too long, so that meeting at the beginning of the next heads meeting is what we got out of it. The other major issue that attracted the attention of heads, you may recall that since 2016, the CARICOM heads have been working through our agencies on the production of a counter-terrorism strategy, because the entire region, like the rest of the world, is aware that we are vulnerable to the wiles of what is passing for the world order and the effects of terrorism, and the region had a regional security system in place, and terrorism was the new concern and the new challenge to be responded to, not just by Trinidad and Tobago or any other country, but all of us, and every single CARICOM country, especially as we rely so very heavily on tourism, which can be so easily disrupted and damaged by acts of terrorism, that there's a certain amount of urgency. So since 2016, there were a number of meetings in the region, meetings about all the commissioners of police, heads of, chief immigration officers, customs and excise, and prisons. These quasi-security agencies all met in their various subsectors, and together they prepared, their work generated the draft counterterrorism strategy. And as you know, Trinidad and Tobago has responsibility for the area of regional security in the so-called quasi-cabinet of the CARICOM. And that means that I, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, it was my responsibility since 2016 to pull this together. And I'm pleased to announce that at this meeting in Port-au-Prince, the strategy has been adopted. So there is now a strategy on counterterrorism adopted by CARICOM for execution by all the governments of CARICOM. So we can move now into the implementation plan. And that is where we are with respect to that. Now, this is not just something that is pulled out of the ether for fashion. You may recall what we went through in this country with respect to FACTA. We are in a similar situation now with respect to Global Forum and the EU acting separately from FACTA and Global Forum. And one of the things that is weighing heavily against us in the region and Trinidad and Tobago nationally is the fact that the EU has taken a position quite unilaterally to blacklist some CARICOM countries. And one of the cases they've made against us in that way is that we have not sufficiently done two things. One is to enact the required satisfactory anti-terrorism law, and that we have not demonstrated that our tax accountability and reporting systems are such that they are not to be deemed to be antiquated, and that there is too much lack of transparency in our tax system. There's too much protection for, you would have heard our Attorney General talking on many occasions about the need to be able to have more information from persons who deal with tax matters. And the EU has gone ahead, even though we've satisfied the FACTA arrangements and we are satisfying the Global Forum arrangements, the EU has gone ahead and negative Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada and a couple of others. Grenada has managed to show that they have been hard done by. We are working quite hard to meet these requirements, and very soon you'll see in the Parliament we are tying up a few loose ends. But CARICOM took careful note and objected to the unilateral way that the EU has gone about damaging our profile by blacklisting us, when in fact we are complying and cooperating and getting good results, and in some cases, like in the case of Grenada, would have complied. And as we took part in the requirements for Global Forum, we and others did not expect that the EU would treat us in that way and label us as, what's the term they've used? Tax havens. You know, they've labeled Trinidad and Tobago as a tax haven, which is not quite accurate, and they've done so largely because they've gone outside of the step-by-step arrangements which we are complying with and make these pronouncements. So CARICOM took note of that and has decided that we will indicate to the EU that we are complying and we expect to be treated in the context of our compliance and not any arbitrary action where the northern developed countries believe that they can just make any pronouncement on us because we are, in their eyes, helpless and they make all the rules. And even as we comply with the rules, we don't get the benefit of compliance. So that was a major thing, but what was observed also was that the speed at which they were moving to de-risk CARICOM banks seems to have slowed down, and we hope that that is as a result of the interventions that we have made and the compliance that we've had. And because, you know, the last time I spoke to you, I did tell you that CARICOM had designated the Prime Minister of Antigua to go to North America and elsewhere and to make our case in the banking fora in these metropolitan areas. And we hope that what we are seeing in the slowing down of new countries and banks being de-risked, that is going to keep going in that direction until we get this matter off the table. But that was a matter of great concern, and it did take, we continue to keep our eyes on that. There were other matters that attracted our attention. You would have, in the caucus agreed to appoint a new head of the Caribbean Court of Justice. As you may know, Chief Justice Sir Dennis Byron is leaving soon. His term comes to an end because the Chief Justice of the Caribbean Court of Justice serves a 1 year, 7 year, one term of 7 years. So he is going, I think he's due out in May or somewhere along there. But when he goes, he will be replaced by Mr. Saunders, who is a well-known jurist here in the Caribbean, a Jamaican, I think he is. So he's going to replace Sir Dennis Byron. So the caucus, the heads of government, chose the replacement. We also, the University of the West Indies, represented by the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor, Chancellor Robert Bermudez and Vice Chancellor Hilary Beckles, came to make a presentation to the heads indicating that the university has very serious financial challenges to meet, which require urgent attention, and they implored the countries that are in arrears or those that have accumulated arrears, that the university accounts require that those arrears be dealt with in some substantial way so as to not have their accounts be presented in a manner which should damage the university's ability to run its operation from sound financial practice, to put it mildly. So the heads agreed, given the case made by the university and the far-reaching consequences of these matters not being addressed, the heads agreed that states will pay attention to the university's plight, and I expect that the university will visit Trinidad and Tobago in the next 2 weeks or thereabouts to have bilateral discussions, because the discussions with respect to the various countries as to who owes what and who can do what with respect to the debt will be handled on a bilateral basis. So each country will talk to the university to see what can be done to bring about, well, pretty much a bailout from the situation that they're in at the moment. We also had the requirements for, well, we settled on the next meeting that's going to take place in Jamaica, but we had another major issue in front of us which would take up a lot of our time in the coming months, and that is, as you know, the Cotonou Agreement. The Cotonou Agreement, which is the agreement between the African, Caribbean, Pacific nations and the developed nations. Those agreements are coming to an end very soon. I think it's 2020. And the new negotiations towards the new agreement would have to take place, I think, the beginning of August of this year. And therefore, we as a part of the ACP and as the ACP to negotiate trading arrangements with the developed countries, we have to get our act together now and to be in a position to negotiate the next trading arrangement between the developing countries of the ACP and the developed world. Because what exists under the Cotonou Agreement is the basis on which trade is conducted between these blocks of nations. And that the agreement at Cotonou took us until 2020. So to go forward beyond 2020, we have to have a new agreement which must be negotiated now. And it will take about 2 years for the negotiations to take place. So we start in August, and we hope that by 2019, early 2020, we can have an agreement and a new and hopefully improved agreement. Now, if we don't put ourselves in a position to handle this properly, then other regions, or let me put it differently, we can end up living by the terms of other regions. So if we want to influence the decision to have our our requests and our terms and conditions be part of the negotiations, we have to participate from now. Fortunately, the Foreign Minister of Jamaica is chairing one of these groupings, and the CARICOM heads, we're focusing very heavily on supporting Jamaica with the rest of our inputs and to put us in a position to take part in these post-Cotonou discussions. And that is against the background of the Brexit negotiations, which that is also something we have to bear in mind, because we are trading quite well with Europe, particularly Britain, and the Brexit negotiations are ongoing at the moment and would be pretty much paralleling the Cotonou negotiations, and there would be considerations one way or the other for the post-Brexit. So we have two sets of trading arrangements which will emerge out of the coming months. So CARICOM as a block, as a unit, have to have its act together to be able to get the best out of what comes out of these agreements. So those are the discussions, the details of which are in the documents of the Secretariat, and they'll be available for scrutiny at that, the Foreign Ministry, if you want to get into further details as to what exactly is involved in these matters. What we'll do, as soon as the communique of this meeting is posted, we will post on the Prime Minister's website all the relevant documents to which I'm referring here quite cursorily, because all of these points I'm making here are supported by significant documentation of work being done by the specialists at the Secretariat. And of course, the very interesting topic of West Indies cricket came up. As you may recall, CARICOM heads had a unanimous position at the Belize meeting, I think it was early last year, with respect to an intervention so as to bring about some sanity to what exists now as the management of West Indies cricket. The position was unanimous as far as we were concerned. Soon after, one of our colleagues broke rank, and you know CARICOM decisions have to be done by unanimity, broke rank, and that undermined the Belize decision, resulting in Chairman Keith Mitchell of Grenada, who was chairing the cricket subunit. I was on that unit, and Chairman Mitchell resigned from in annoyance. But the bottom line was the cricket subcommittee of the heads is now being chaired by Prime Minister Gonsalves of St. Vincent. And we got legal advice. We got two senior counsel advice. And the advice is that West Indies cricket is a public good. And following on from that, the heads at CARICOM have taken a decision that we accept the legal advice that we've got, and the CARICOM heads, CARICOM as a body, will move to interact with West Indies cricket under those conditions as a public good, where a public good is something that is enjoyed by all without all, or even anyone, any particular one, putting in anything to it. And even those who don't put into it can enjoy it because it is available to everyone. When you bear in mind that West Indies cricket was run by a company based in the Cayman Islands, and of course, the product of the legacy of West Indies cricket is fast becoming a depleted stock, we are of the view that the findings of, or the advice of the lawyers need to be pursued in a way to bring about not the management and the operations of the cricket, but to set down proper best practice governance rules for West Indies cricket. And let me repeat that. It is not, or let me put it in the positive. Caribbean politicians represented by the heads at Heads of Government have no interest, desire, or requirement to manage the West Indies cricket team or West Indies cricket. What we are aiming to do is to intervene to protect this public good by ensuring that there's legislated best practice standard arrangements by which this public good can be managed, and that the value of the legacy can be protected, and that there can be a future for West Indies cricket as we knew it. Against that background, the heads have taken the decision that we will now, on the basis of our legal advice, which we have adopted at this meeting, we will approach the ICC, International Cricket Council, and indicate to them the position of the heads of government of the region with respect to our adoption of this position of this public good. And we trust that in approaching the ICC, we expect that they will talk with us. And we'll be able to indicate to them the urgent requirement and the desperate urgency that is required for West Indies cricket to be saved by this legislative approach to bring best practice to the public good of West Indies cricket, so that we could preserve something which is part of the heritage of all West Indian people. Against that background, as you may know, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting takes place in London in mid-April. Most, if not all, of the heads are going to be at that meeting in London. And against that background, the decision was taken in Haiti that a small delegation led by Chairman Ralph Gonzalez, and I also will be a part of that delegation, we will meet with persons from the ICC to hold discussions against the background of this interpretation of the protection of the public good of West Indies cricket. And that's where we are at the moment. That meeting will take place in April, hopefully, and we will take it from there. But at the moment, West Indies is engaged in qualifiers to try and get into the cricket series that's coming up. Qualifiers, and losing to Afghanistan. And if there was any time that we should get serious, that West Indies cricket is in danger, that time is now. And we at the level of the heads are of the view that we cannot sit or stand idly by and be told to mind our own business. And there's something else too. The current Cricket West Indies, whatever they represent, having rejected the Barito report, which indicated how we should have gone forward, they have invited the heads to place a board member representing the heads on the current board. Well, the heads have rejected that offer, even though in the event that we were going to accept their offer, one country did in fact make a nomination. As you may recall, a nomination was in fact made before by the heads of government, and such a nomination was turned down by Cricket West Indies, and they asked the heads to look again for somebody more pleasing to them. On this occasion, the heads took the position to say that we will decline the offer to sit on what passes now for the board of West Indies cricket, and we will pursue resolutely the defense of the public good that is West Indies cricket. So those are most of the items that we dealt with, and if you have questions, I could undertake to answer a few of your questions, and I may be able to expand a bit more on the agenda of the meeting.
Hi, I'm Carl Bridgel. I'm from the Newsday. Can you just clarify the role the WICB plays with the governments, the interplay between the WICB and the heads of government?
The CWI,
well,
Cricket West Indies.
It's not the WICB anymore, I'm sorry.
WICB was in my day. There's no role that's being played now. I mean, what happens is that the governments of the region fund and support cricket as a popular sport through the school system. Most of the junior facilities are public facilities. Most of what goes into the game at adult and youth, at youth level, state funded and state supported. Many of the venues are state owned, and therefore the state has a big stake in cricket. But over and above that, if you talk to anybody, intellectual or otherwise, they will tell you that West Indies cricket is part of our heritage. And that's why it is deemed to be this public good. It's something that you can't isolate and put your finger on. But you cannot be a West Indian and not be aware of a piece of your own personal pride, which emanates from the success or the presence or the history of West Indies cricket.
Well, given the heavy involvement of the state then, why haven't the heads of government considered just doing away with with Cricket West Indies and forming their own organization to look after it as a public good?
No, it doesn't go like that. International cricket, like international football, is run by a body who organizes the game, and if you're going to be a part of that game, you have to be subjected to the rules and regulations of that game. So cricket as a game, as an international sport, is run by the International Cricket Council, where all cricket playing nations are affiliates. And we are certainly not even contemplating of being outside of the rest of the world. We want to be inside, under the rules and regulations of the ICC, but we want to be able to manage our affairs in a best practice arrangement. Our failure is not an ICC failure. Our failure is a failure of our own management of our own affairs, because we do not have the proper regulatory and legislative framework to do that.
Well, that's what I mean. Can the boards then, so what, you have to get ICC approval to dissolve the Cricket West Indies or something and form your own organization?
The governments can't dissolve the boards because we didn't appoint them. And that's the problem. This thing evolved over time in such a way that these things have a kind of a life of their own. And if we go like a bull in a china shop in righteous indignation, we could find ourselves running afoul of the ICC and finding ourselves being left out of the program of cricket. We don't want that. We want to be in the program of cricket. So whatever we do must end up with West Indies cricket being within the confines of the ICC arrangements, and that's why we are going to talk to the ICC to make the necessary adjustments, to encourage necessary adjustments, because I'm sure that those who wish us well, all the cricketing world, want to see West Indies cricket return to where it used to be. And that includes the ICC.
All right, great. And just to go back, I know that you said that terrorism was something that was high on the security agenda. First of all, can you clarify when the agreement that you all took, the security agreement, when that will be enacted, adopted at least by the rest of the governments, and did you get any feedback from any of your colleagues about the recent terror threats in Trinidad and the travel advisories from the various countries?
Those are a lot of questions. Let me answer the first one. What I said, and I hope I'm trying to make myself clear, the need to have a counter-terrorism strategy was put on the agenda and worked on since early 2016. And we worked on it, and we got to a point now where the counter-terrorism strategy was adopted. In other words, we now have available to all the countries an accepted counter-terrorism strategy. So there's nothing else to be done about that. Now, we've reached that point. The draft has been accepted as the strategy. That now lays the foundation for an implementation plan. And you may know that there are two bodies. We have the Council for Law Enforcement, which is one of the subunits of the CARICOM there. We also have Impacts, which is the other body for the regional body, which does the monitoring of behaviors within, and it's a regional body. So those agencies are now having to work with a strategy which has been accepted by CARICOM as its response to this challenge of being required to respond to terrorism as a new challenge. So it's a work that took place, so we are at a particular stage, and if you look on the website in a day or two, we'll publish how we got there, and you will see the various meetings that took place when the Commissioner of Police met, the regional police heads, the immigration officers, the customs officers. So all that work was taking place in the few months past. And we are now at the stage where we have completed the exercise, and we do have all countries, from the small associated ones to the bigger ones, we now accept the counterterrorism strategy. And of course, that being so, and given that we are threatened, as I tried to say a while ago, we are being threatened by the EU and Global Forum to make sure that we comply with all that they want to be able to take part in the world banking system. There's an urgency to enact legislation so that we can comply as quickly as possible. And therefore, a decision was taken at CARICOM, at this meeting in Port-au-Prince, that all the territories in the CARICOM must at least table, if not complete, the legislative program with respect to their anti-terrorism laws.
And the second question?
And that must be done by the time we get to Jamaica on the 4th of July.
And the second question about the feedback about the terrorist threat and the travel advisories against Trinidad.
Well, two things. What we experience in Trinidad and Tobago, we didn't discuss it in any detail. I mean, we keep our, we handle that. But the general understanding exists among all our territories that we do have situations to attend, and law enforcement has to be available, to be used within the confines of our law to ensure that our population is protected from harm that will come our way in the event that there are those who so intend to. And with respect to the third point was the advisory. Well, travel advisories are the views of persons who look at our situation and come to conclusions, and they issue travel advisories. We've been having travel advisories for as long as I can remember, since we've been having a crime upsurge in the country. We as a country, we don't issue travel advisories about other people's countries. But if it looks as if we have a particular kind of problem here for a particular period of time, some of our countries are even required by law to advise their citizens to be careful. And I'm sure that there'll be other instances in the region where travel advisory will be issued. And all I will say to our citizens is that we need to conduct our affairs in this country so as not to expose ourselves to arbitrary travel advisories from persons who believe that we are more dangerous or more of a threat to them than we are.
Well, yes, but I mean, you mentioned tourism. Were they not worried about the impact in the region?
Very worried, but what can they do about it? We can't tell Britain what to tell Britain or the United States or anybody. What we can do, because we're worried, is to try and eliminate the threat that a violent crime poses to our well-being. And that was expressed across the meeting by virtually every country who spoke, that these developments are not helping us. Right? So that's why crime has to be and has to remain a number one focus, so as not to, over and above its direct effect, not to have the indirect effect of damaging our economies.
Prime Minister Joel Brown, TV6 News. In your absence, there's been a situation in Cedros concerning coastal erosion and families having to be evacuated from the area. It has led to even a conversation about the issue of where homes are built, and also the government's response when people do suffer any sort of natural disaster. Have you been briefed on the situation, and do you have any comment?
I have a short brief on it. The comment is that coastal erosion in some parts of the country is a natural phenomenon. And sometimes it's accelerated, sometimes it slows down, but across many parts of our coastline there is active coastal erosion. In that particular area in Granville, because of the nature of the geology, if you have high seas and the sea cuts the toe of the cliff, because of the nature of the rock, It's a sandy kind of rock. It will collapse downwards. And even if these people had built there, say, 10, 20 years ago, and they were sufficiently far away from the sea, the nature of the erosion on that coastline could be so aggressive that it will soon become a problem as it has become now. And in those situations, we have to respond to it. And I understand that some persons were evacuated. And I intend to go and visit very soon to see what's going on, but I'm sure that we'll be able to respond to it properly. In some situations, you can take action to ameliorate the damage. In some, you just have to withdraw. And if it's a cliff that's collapsing, you can't hold the cliff up. You just have to withdraw from the area and put people at a safe distance. And in some areas, you can do coastal work, which will eliminate or reduce the power of the sea in damaging the coastline. In some areas, it doesn't make economic sense to do that. It might be beyond the engineering capacity or the good sense to try and do that, depending on the nature. So if it's a cliff that is collapsing, there isn't much that you could do. If it's a low angle area, you can probably do coastal protection. So it is a case-by-case arrangement. But coastal erosion is a geomorphological feature of where the sea meets the land in many areas.
Apologies for interrupting, Prime Minister, but the government be looking at, because of this incident, other coastal areas to determine whether any proactive measures need to be made in terms of, as you said, withdrawal to avoid any sort of issues like what had occurred in Cedros?
Well, yes, the answer is yes. And if you had listened, or if you may not recall, when the Minister of Work spoke in the Parliament and elsewhere, at least on 2 occasions I can recall, he spoke about the work program of the Ministry of Works and Transport. And in the Drainage Division, we have a number of projects, some in that same southwestern peninsula, some on the Manzanilla side, Tobago, where we are, in fact, expending monies to protect the coastline from aggressive erosion. So we do have projects, and sometimes you have to go beyond the planned projects depending on what is happening. But in some areas, there isn't much you can do because the scale of the erosion is such that there isn't much you can do about it.
In terms of the travel advisories, just wondering, is the government, how would the government then describe them? As you said that countries will come up with their own advisories. Would you describe the advisories concerning Trinidad and Tobago as accurate or inaccurate?
Let me put it this way. Leading up to Carnival, we had been very much in touch with those countries that issued those advisories. You would have seen, I think there were 4 countries that issued advisories at the same time. And you also would have seen 4 ambassadors coming to meet, high commissioners, and 1 ambassador and 3 high commissioners coming to meet the Prime Minister. I can tell you, had we not been working very closely with these who we regard as our international partners, the travel advisories that would have gone out on Trinidad and Tobago would have been far worse than what went out. That much I can tell you, and I say no more for the moment.
And in terms of the counter-terrorism strategy that you have alluded to, that the CARICOM heads are looking at as well and so on, in terms of the modality, would this involve the establishment, in terms of sharing of intelligence? How would this really work to ensure that you have the right intelligence at least?
Oh, definitely. In fact, the sharing of intelligence is a key part of the management of this challenge, because the people, where terrorism is concerned, it is an international and global problem. So all countries in different fora agree to share information. Some countries work closer with others, but the sharing of information is an integral part. And each country is virtually looking out for the other one. And the faster we can share the information, the better position we are in to respond if we need to respond. And also, given the nature of the threat that we've been experiencing in recent years, it involves people being on the move or people communicating to do harm. And if A finds out that B is in harm's way, or D or F, as you share information, that gives you a chance to widen your ability to find out what's coming your way.
Two other things very quickly. One, my colleague Mark Basant has been
sorry, I didn't get that.
My colleague Mark Basant has been reporting on a Trinidadian couple that has been detained in Jordan, and this has been the result of some requests in terms of local authorities and U.S. authorities and Jordanian authorities. Is this something that has caught the Cabinet's attention?
Well, an element of the Cabinet is the National Security Council. And the National Security Council is aware of a lot of this. And I would also say, I can even say all of it, because the National Security Council of Trinidad and Tobago is an integral part of the sharing of information that you mentioned a while ago. And there are other agencies and other countries, security and intelligence gathering agencies, who would come into information which they would make available not only to us but to the rest of the world. We cannot bury our heads in the sand. Some of our citizens have gone as far as to have taken part in zones of conflict. Some have lost their lives there. Some are currently, as I speak to you now, detained in foreign countries under allegations of either being on their way to or coming from these zones, and some have returned to our country. So this is an issue which I'm not making it up, you're not making it up. This is an integral part of our wherewithal. And therefore, what is required is for the country to have the ability to find the information, to receive the information, to monitor people's actions if their actions are deleterious to our good order, and to be in a position to intervene if an intervention is required. That is the fact.
Does that in any way involve ensuring that those who may be detained but not charged with any offense, that their rights are protected as Trinidad and Tobago?
And that is why I said a while ago that the same way the state is required to protect people under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, such persons have the protection of the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. We don't act arbitrarily. And by the same token, those of us who are responsible to manage this, we just can't come out with everything we say, everything we know, and say it, because we might be defeating the very purpose of what we're trying to do. So we give the public all the information that we believe is pertinent and germane to what we're doing. And at any particular point in time, we give you what we believe we can share with you. Sometimes there's information at that particular time we can't share with you, but of course I know it's easy for others who are not party to the information to say, well, there's nothing to it. Well, they are free to say so. But those of us who are having to manage the situation, we don't have that luxury.
All right, Rashad Khan, iNews. You said a while back that crime is bad for tourism, and it was discussed in the meeting. Given that it's 59 days into the year so far and there's almost 100 murders, can we see any changes to our current crime plan?
Well, what I can tell you is that we work continuously to ensure that the objective that we have remains a reduction in violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago. I cannot now tell you, as I speak to you here now, that there isn't somebody right now planning to kill his wife or his mother or the neighbor or his competing drug dealer. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that the state is giving its security services and quasi-security services all the resources available to try and prevent or to detect those who engage in criminal conduct. And we are confident that as we stay on the job with the various interventions, because there's no one thing that we can do that will prevent it. There are a series of things that have to be done all at the same time. And I'm sure you're familiar with all those things, which we are doing, and hopefully at the end of it, the outcome would be a significant reduction in the level of violent crime in Trinidad and Tobago. And I dare say the same thing applies to the rest of our colleagues in the region.
Prime Minister, I'm Karen Kose-Philip from CNews. This is a topic that has been going back and forth. On Monday night, the opposition leaders said that the UNC would only be willing to support the anti-gang legislation if the sunset clause is 2.5 years and the government wants it for 5 years. What's your response?
Well, my response can only be that the unfortunate thing in Trinidad and Tobago is that the opposition continues to play games with our attempt to fight crime. It's unfortunate. And let me explain to you why I've said that. In 2010, MP Colum Imbert and MP Marlene MacDonald were the opposition members on the bill that was going to create the anti-gang legislation, because the government of the day saw the need to give the police what the police wanted as an additional tool to respond to the gang culture which had become virtually chronic in Trinidad and Tobago. That's 2010. We voted with the government so that the people of Trinidad and Tobago can have their police service make gang activity, recruiting into a gang, leading a gang, all of these as criminal offenses. And we tied to it difficulty with getting bail once you were held under that law. And it was really the bail, because people were going to be denied bail. It was the denial of bail that was the biggest abrogation of their rights that caused us in 2010 to put a sunset clause on the law and give the police 5 years to use the law and revisit it after 5 years. For that 5-year period, nobody in the government then had a problem with the law. 5 years. There's a change of government and the law came up for renewal. The opposition decided, they took a clear decision to play politics with the law. So all of a sudden, they decided that this law, which they brought, which we supported, which the police continues to say they want, they decided that they wanted statistics. And on the basis of not getting statistics to suit them, they voted it down the first time. We gave them the statistics, and we brought the law back to Parliament. It went to a joint select committee. Then it came to the House, and we had a marathon debate, and it came to a vote. And interestingly enough, this same law which they brought in the Parliament, which had a life of 5 years, because the police wants time to be able to penetrate the gangs and to collect evidence, because without evidence you can't prosecute anybody for any crime. And it is not giving it to me or to the PNM or to the government. It is giving the tool to the police. But the opposition believes that it is giving it to the PNM or to the government. And they decided that the law must only have a life of 18 months. Knowing full well from their own experience, where they had 5 years to operate the law, that 18 months is saying we're going to pass the law, but we know that it's not going to do anything, because in 18 months we certainly will still have gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. They know that, because we are not inventing any wheels here. Other places in the world where there was a gang culture, and the gang culture was brought to heel and eliminated, in some parts of California, in New York, in Chicago, you need time for the law enforcement to get into it, and time to gather the evidence to prosecute those who are profiting by the gang culture. And the opposition knows that. And the reason why they're telling us a year and a half is because they want us to fail. They want the crime to continue. They want the murders to continue, so they could point their finger at the government and saying that it is the government that is causing the crime. And they have this foolish argument that whenever the PNM is in office, crime goes up. As if, somebody from Balize House goes out and commits crime, or somebody in the government goes and commits crime. The country experiences, and we are experiencing violent crime now. And the police needs this tool to be able to deal with gang leaders and the people who are recruiting their children into their gangs, and gang culture as a profit center and a business in this country. So these owners of the 5-year offer the government 1.5 years. We said 4 years. They said no. Then they said 2 years. They voted on the bill. They voted on the bill. They got outside instructions in the Parliament to vote on the bill. And then they went down to Debe, had a meeting, and said we don't need anti-gang legislation. Well, from the way they're behaving, at least they're speaking the truth. They think we don't need it, and they said we don't need it. But having voted down the bill, they find themselves in a political doghouse with the population. So they're trying to make their way back, but they still want to play politics with it. So they asked to meet the Attorney General and their persons met recently, they come back to the year and a half again. That's the behavior of the opposition. Unfortunately, it is a bill that requires their vote. Every single PNM vote is available and has been available to make gang activity illegal in this country. It is those in the opposition who are not prepared to put their vote to make the law come into force so that gang activity, recruiting into a gang, being a member of a gang, operating a gang, leading a gang, that these things will become crimes. Not that the gang commit a crime and you charge the gang for what the gang member did. It is just to be in a gang or to organize a gang, because gangs are organized for bad reasons. So we are now being told that they will give us 2 years. But let me tell you what the 2 years mean and how they play in the politics. 2.5 now. They see this bill expiring in 2.5 years. And from my information, they expect to come back to the parliament 2.5 years from now, puts us smack into the next general election. As a matter of fact, see what they've said in DB, that we don't need the law. See the 2.5 years that they're offering now. You know what that means? In 2.5 years, the parliament will be dissolved. And there will be no parliament to extend this law if we allow it to fall due in 2.5 years. When the parliament is prorogued, dissolved, who is going to be there to extend it? So it dies. And if that happens, a lot of work being done by the police with respect to gangs, what's going to happen to it? But of course, if the country has an opposition that is only prepared to give the country's police 2 years, then we'll take the 2 years. We take the 2 years. The 2.5 years, if that is what the opposition is prepared to give the country's police, then we'll take it, because we can't get any more. If it's being rationed that the police must only have 2.5 years to fight the gangs in this country, and that is the most they're prepared, as leader of my team, I'll take it.
Prime Minister, the opposition leader also made a couple other comments that I'd like your response to. She said that she questioned whether the terror threat during Carnival was a charade and a distraction. And secondly, she asked whether or not you're aware of some senior official, government official, who received a suitcase full of money.
See, I don't want to spend my time, responding to the opposition leader, because the opposition leader could say anything. I want to remind this country that the current opposition leader was a chairman of the National Security Council of this country. And it was during her tenure, if you may recall, that she declared a state of emergency. And during that state of emergency, she called the then opposition leader and told him that Muslims are going to assassinate her. And they arrested 14 people, I think it was. But they were arrested under the powers of the state of emergency and had to be released a few days after, when those powers disappeared, when the emergency ended. Do you remember that? And as a former chairman of the National Security Council, I want to remind the opposition leader that some of the people who made international headlines in the outer world and are poster boys for ISIS, I'm asking her to go back to that period of the state of emergency and see who she picked up. Instead of coming now to undermine the country's effort and the country's confidence in its actions in responding to those who would harm us, you get the irresponsible action of an opposition leader trying to give the impression that the government is acting capriciously. And worse, threatening the country's racial and ethnic stability by accusing this government of attacking Muslims. Trinidad and Tobago is the only country in the democratic world where the government of the day is responding to these challenges and does not have the full support of the rest of the parliament. We are the only country I know.
Prime Minister, I saw at the press conference in Haiti, in response to a question, you said that there were 400 persons in Trinidad.
I did not say that. I was asked by a reporter from North America, I think it was, how many persons would fall under the concern of the government with respect to ISIS and sympathy for ISIS and so on. And I told her approximately, from the information that we have, the persons who would have got involved in that arrangement, the information that we are working with and we have is approximately 200. I never said 400. 400 is the Mulal figure.
And lastly, as chairman of the Security Council, are you aware of any report of a Russian spy ship here in Trinidad?
I have seen that in the newspapers, but I can, what I can tell you is that Port of Spain has always been a port of call for all kinds of military vessels from all nations that come here for provisioning or paying courtesy calls and so on. So I don't know that we should be unduly alarmed by any other vessel that quite properly goes through there are procedures for such vessels to come into our waters and into our ports. And those procedures are followed, and there's nothing to be alarmed about there.
At the same time, there were U.S. air travel in the area.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, there's something called U.S. Southern Command, operated out of Miami, where the U.S. has assets in the southern area, in the Caribbean, around us, in South America all the time. So we won't speak for them.
You had said that CARICOM Heads of Government to ensuring that it's best practice.
All right, let me explain to you what is happening. What is happening to us here now with West Indies cricket is not unique, except that the West Indies cricket team is a team that is pulled together from a number of countries, separate countries. All other cricket teams belong to one country. And we are unique in the cricket world, or the sporting world for that matter, where a whole number of countries produce one team. And Australia had a problem when their team declined, and they intervened and did what had to be done to put their cricket on a footing. They came back as world beaters. Pakistan, India, right? When you get to this situation where you require to put in place the appropriate mechanisms to develop and nurture the game for the players, for the public, then certain interventions are required. What has happened in the West Indies is that for the last 20-odd years, we have not been able to rise to the occasion, and as a result, the game and the legacy are at risk. We're not inventing any wheel. All we're asking for is the requirement, is the acceptance that something has to be done, and not what is being done now. And we're saying that something ought to be properly covered by best practice, and we need the support of the ICC to do that. One more question? Yes, that was a long discussion. You know, the Caribbean territories are very much involved in the whole discussion on climate change and are reporting that we are being affected very severely. And we are, in fact, in some instances, some countries are already participating in the international effort at the local level. Barbados has only, it was reported yesterday, that Barbados has just got a $20 million project approved from the funding that is part of the response to climate change. And all Caribbean territories, what they call SIDS, Small Island Developing States, they are a separate block in the world grouping, which are being particularly looked out for in the whole COP arrangements. We are right in there with it. Yeah, we have just ratified the agreement. Yes, we just ratified it, and that now puts us under compelling requirements to do certain things. We are required to get away from hydrocarbons and go into renewables by a certain percentage by a certain time. So we are part of it. and we are very much in there.
You mentioned hydrocarbons. We are hydrocarbons.
And that's why we didn't just rush in there and agree to any and everything. We very carefully looked at what was being required of us and the cost of doing it and the effect on us. And when we were satisfied that the arrangements we could live with, then we ratified it.
Prime Minister, I know Mr. Leader said that you're willing to take it 2.5 years success by officials.
On behalf of the police of Trinidad and Tobago.
And how soon do you intend to communicate this to the officials?
As soon as we realize that they are serious, because the opposition is playing games. Don't be surprised if tomorrow they say something else. As a matter of fact, the Attorney General wrote them, and they don't commit themselves, you know. They leave themselves room to play the games. So now that she said so publicly, well, the opportunity will arise for us to see. Thank you very much.